Greetings and once again welcome to I've Got Your Six from CopBLue. Today we have Sam Tuberville with us, who is the chaplain for the Florence City Police Department, as well as the what is it that you do for McLeod exactly?
Chaplain.
You're the chaplain. Are you the chief clergy?
I am the director.
The director of clergy for McLeod Hospital. And of course, as we always do, we start off with a quote from Marcus Aurelius, one of my favorite philosophers. You have the power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. You have that power. In other words, sometimes you just can't absolutely find a reason to get up, but you dig deep enough, you'll find a way to get there. And as we talk about this a little bit today, maybe that saying will kind of resonate with you. So first of all, so you were a cop before you became a minister?
I was for 3.5 years with the city of Florence.
So, I mean, I'm not saying it's like a bartender become a preacher or anything, but I'm just saying this. So why law enforcement ministry? I mean,
that's where my calling was. I grew up in the church, but never felt called to the pulpit. After 2010, we had an officer, Matthew Clayton, shot and killed off duty. And I went back after I had left the police department to minister to them. And I didn't think that's what I was doing, but at the time they said, well, Sam, you need to be our chaplain. And that's how I heard God's call. I didn't hear God's call to the church, but I heard it clearly to the ministry.
So how do you think it helps law enforcement?
It helps law enforcement because most times law enforcement officers have such a wanky schedule that they can't get to church on a Sunday. Or they can get to church, they will if they really are desperate to get to a church. But most of the time they aren't going to church. They work during church hours, and they see the bad things in life. They need church more than anybody.
So, one of the things that is, I guess, the edict of CopBLue is, reducing law enforcement officer suicide. So, in the current environment we're in, obviously there's a lot of strife going on. A lot of strife. A lot of let's be honest, it's crazy. So why do you think, besides just the inherent craziness and the law enforcement being used basically as political cannon fodder, why do you think law enforcement suicides are growing so much?
I think the suicides are growing, and it's just it's the nature of the work. Most people don't have as many traumatic experiences in life as a law enforcement officer does. Something traumatic might happen to somebody, but law enforcement officers are it's going to be more frequent with them. I'm just, as I'm talking about this, and I don't have to say this to your audience because I know they know. I mean, as I'm even talking about the word traumatic event, images are flashing in my head of things that I've seen. And it's the cumulative effect. Everyone has post-traumatic stress. You've heard it said that you don't have a disorder unless it's a condition that prolongs over a couple of months or so. That's when it becomes a disorder. There is the talk of changing it from a disorder to moral injury. The stigma of PTSD, a disorder, means there's something wrong with me. But an injury is something that happens to me. And so that's exactly what why suicides, I think, are more prevalent, is because officers are seeing the worst of the worst. The song, Jackson Brown's song, Doctor My Eyes, if you ever read or heard the lyrics to that or paid attention, it's about PTSD. It is seeing the thing so much that I don't even know how to cry anymore. That's what the lyrics of the song are about. And when officers are exposed to things time and time again, they quickly go into their bad coping mechanisms, the drugs, sex, and purchasing. So they either go into alcohol, they go into adulterous affairs, they purchase ATVs, RVs, boats, you name it, big trucks, you name it. And all of those things add financial pressure to them. And the more junk you have put on you, how do you get out? It's the one thing in your mind that thinks this is the way out. Now we know that's not logical because in humans we have a self-preservation instinct,
Right.
And we don't want to die. But when you're not thinking right, when you got some screwed up thinking, you think that's the way out. You've heard the cliche, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yes.
Um, but I think that's why it is. I think that's why it's so high, because of their continuous exposure to negative events. People don't call the police if they're having a good day, having a party and hey, let's invite the police to the barbecue. Luckily, we do have a lot of people that have been showing support of police by doing that, and that's great. But for the most part, people call police when it's bad. It is really bad. I can't handle this myself. I'm going to call the police in. And police have to come in and solve other people's problems.
It's really honestly like walking around with a big bag of woe on your shoulders. I mean, just think about it. Everybody has that they carry. You know, your mother passed away, your father passed away, your favorite uncle, and you put that in that bag of woe and you put it on your shoulder and you walk around with it every day. Just imagine, if you can, that bag is about 1,000 times bigger. Not only do you have your woes, but you have the accumulated woes of all of the people that you try to help every day. And I can understand how that would become a huge burden. In addition to that, I also totally understand the concept of how, in a world where law enforcement officers' job is to establish control in a chaotic world, how when they're losing control of theirs, they try and do things like, be it sex, drugs, and rock and roll, whatever it is you want to call it, they try and reestablish that control by doing things that they think are going to help them, which honestly, well, that just makes it worse.
That's a very good point. And it has been said, officers have a dark sense of humor. We laugh at things because that's a coping mechanism.
Yes.
But police officers can't laugh at a dead baby or a dead cop.
Nope.
So what happens when you have a dead baby or a dead cop? Then your coping mechanisms are overwhelmed, and that's when you will be more susceptible to going into a dark place.
So I guess this would lead me into my next question for you, and this is probably the billion-dollar question. How can we help? What can we do?
We help by getting out in front of it. Don't wait until somebody's right on that cliff and try to save them. Communication is the key. Communication is the key. Knowing your people. I say this to police officers all the time. I'm a chaplain. I cannot see everybody. I cannot see everybody in a frequency they need to be seen.
Right.
And it saddens me when I call up somebody and I haven't talked to them in a while, and I find out that now they're separated from their wife, or something is going on. I'm like, why didn't you call me? I feel like, why didn't they call me? The truth of the matter is, they haven't developed that relationship with me to call me at that time of their need. But as officers, you can watch your buddies. You can watch your buddies and say, he's not acting the same. He's not acting right. He's a little off. And keeping that line of communication open. And as you keep that communication line open, understand that it is not a sign of weakness for somebody else to see something wrong with you. It's really a sign of love. They love you enough to say, hey, you're not acting the same.
I understand. And another thing I think, and you didn't bring it out, but I certainly will, is our leaders out there in law enforcement, our chiefs, our sheriffs, our administrators. You guys need to get on the stick. This is your job. These guys are your responsibility every single day. And everything that we can bring to bear to help these folks to be able to cope, we should be doing that. And you can't sit in your office with the door closed, tied to your computer or your cell phone. You got to get out there in the field with your troops, because they depend on you whether you realize it or not. And I know it's busy. I've been there. I know it's busy. I know the budget ties you up. Whatever, political figure that's got a burr in their saddle with you at that moment in time is going to take up your time. But the most important part of your title is leader of those officers. And they are your responsibility. And I know I don't need to remind you of this, but I'm reminding you of it. So, one last question for you, Padre. How should an officer mentally prepare themselves for the current environment that we have? I mean, what is something, give me a nugget here. So when they wake up and they get ready to go to work that day, be it nighttime or daytime or whatever, what can we do to mentally prepare?
I have said it before that officers don't like the word help. They don't like the word help. But backup, think about it. You don't think it weak to call for backup if you're on a bad call.
Absolutely not. Smart move.
And when your backup officer gets there, he doesn't razz you about having to call backup because you understand the severity of the situation you're in. And officers don't understand the severity of the mental anguish that comes along with the job. And especially after you've had a traumatic event, an officer involved shooting, the riots that are going around right now, especially as that is encroaching on you, you just like after every time you fire your weapon, you need to clean your weapon. After you've gone through a traumatic event, you need to clean the weapon that you use every day.
I agree with that because, I can remember, several times on the job being in a fight or having a particularly tough arrest or whatever, and you get done and your hands are shaking because you got on that adrenaline high. You don't really think about de-escalating the mental anguish that you go through when you see something, that's horrific, a bad wreck or a child fatality or even have to talk to a rape victim or something. That's very traumatic.
My favorite author as far as law enforcement is Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman.
Oh, yeah.
Dave Grossman says that contrary to popular belief, in the moment of a crisis, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your level of training. So you can tell that the officers are trained to go in and clear a building. They're trained, to shoot. But when one of their own gets shot, they're not trained on how to process that, especially when the adrenaline dump comes down, when everything is said and done. And guess what? You go right to alcohol. You go right to whatever your coping mechanism is that usually makes things spiral worse.
I can remember from a generation or two ago, probably my father's father would say, shut up and take it, push it down, deal with it. Don't talk about it. Don't feel emotions. Well, guess what? If you don't deal with them, they're going to deal with you.
Yeah, it's that old cop mentality to suck it up or grow a pair.
Exactly.
It doesn't work. Dirty Harry's a fictional character. He's not a real person.
Absolutely. And I've said this before in my videos, and I'll say it again. This is real life. There's no reset button. There's no respawning your video game character. This is real life. Bullets that are fired downrange can't be put back in the barrel. Well, as always, thank you guys for joining us once again with CopBLUE's I've Got Your Six. And of course, the most important thing that you can do every day is hit that clock and go home safe. Thank you so much, Tim. We appreciate it. And you're doing great work out there.
Thanks.